Welcome to the Scorpio Bookshelf. I'm Joaquin.
And I'm Morgan. This is a podcast about books, besties, and escaping reality.
Happy Friday.
Thank goodness it's Friday.
Today we are going to be covering probably one of our more technical topics, which is world building.
I think everyone immediately jumps to fantasy when we talk about world building, but world building is the base of all good books, in my opinion. We were looking into this topic and I stumbled across a quote that I think really encapsulates what's important about world building, and it's this. The golden rule of world building is that unless otherwise specified, everything inside your imagined world is assumed to behave exactly as it would in the real world.
That's the very first time I have ever heard that, and it hits real hard, but perfect in my head. Like it scratches my brain.
It scratches that brain itch.
Yeah, just in the little crevice of my brain. It just so good. So we're gonna build, pun intended, off of that with some of the research that we've found and agree with or disagree with, if you feel like it, being, I don't know, maybe like it's 8 or 9 sort of key things that we found that does well for us in terms of world building. So I'm going to throw the first one out there, being just depth as a whole. So
yes,
something that I saw was the fact that a book could be really good if the author spent time on one place, just the depth of the place. And whether it be, the quote was saying, one super detailed small city will do better than a country of flat nothingness.
I think a phenomenal example of choosing a small place to intimately develop is Legends and Lattes.
Same. I was like, yo, that's Legends and Lattes in a whole, like as a whole. I was like, perfect.
Yeah, because every nook and cranny of the 2B cafe in Legends and Lattes is intimately described to us. And I could still, to this day, almost a year after reading it, describe to you what that main thoroughfare of the town from the cafe to the like pier type area looks like.
Same. I see it so vividly. Obviously, it's different for everyone in their own little heads, but I can see the map of that little town perfectly.
100%. Because we never get beyond that one place in Legends and Lattes. That's your home for the whole book. That is not to discount books that have a larger travel space, a larger world, but I think we focus on the most well-developed place within a book, and something like Legends and Lattes absolutely excels at that.
Yes, and with it being a cozy fantasy, it sort of brings it down a little bit, which is nice. And not having a big world is nice in a cozy fantasy, so your brain isn't working on overdrive. And I think he just understood that when writing it, so it fit.
100%. And I think it's true of both books in that series that we intimately develop these 2 little hole-in-the-wall shops that make up the entire world, and it just is, again, scratches that itch in your brain that you can see every nook and cranny of this space. And I think in the same breath as that works, something like the Empyrean series, Fourth Wing, Iron Flame, Onyx Storm, also does a phenomenal job, because I could explain to you the entire structure of Bisgayeth with no problem.
Yeah, I don't need the map. Even though it is there, I don't need to look at it and reference it when reading, because I automatically picture how far things are from each other, where exactly it is. So seeing all these AI-generated TikToks have me just going, oh, obviously that's what that looked like. How do you not know what the briefing, like the battle brief classroom looks like? Obviously it looks like that. So
well, things as simple in Onyx Storm, for example, as the Signet sparring dome arena situation. I can perfectly picture what at least I think Rebecca Yarros was getting at in what that area looks like. She does a fantastic job of having this really broad world, but intimately developing each space within that world. Like, we know what Ryerson House looks like. We know what the field that Threshing took place on looks like. We know what the battle brief room looks like. We know what the classrooms look like. We know what their rooms look like. She does a very good job of not being convoluted in her world building, but still allowing us a full picture of everywhere that these characters exist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Ryerson House to me, it doesn't ever mention it. Ryerson House to me feels like a gigantic gold building. I don't know why. I think it's like maybe just a little bit of the onyx within it, just not even just gold itself, but yellow stones, very just bright compared to the rest of the world. I don't know why, but
Yeah. I think it's also because of what it signifies in the books, like the space itself. So that's part of it. But
probably.
yeah, and that's the other interesting thing about depth in world building is there can be so much intimate detail that everyone still pictures differently, and that's such a cool experience.
Yes. On the so another point to world building in general is logistics, flow, and consistency.
Yes.
So consistency wise, I feel is a lot more important in a series like the Empyrean series. So if Rebecca decided to just change things up, it would completely throw off everything in the story. So having that consistency of whether it be the distance needed or time traveled between places, because the timing, they're always mentioning the timing of how long it takes somebody to fly somewhere. If that changes, it'll automatically throw the size and the amount at stake in the book to travel.
Yes. 100%. And I think that's what's tough about something with a large world like the Empyrean series is those little tiny continuities that have to be perfect or it can completely disrupt the world that has been built. I think in the same breath, something like One Dark Window, where we have this small town within a shrouded mist that's built up, we have to have an understanding of where those boundaries of safety are. And if those are moving goalposts, it throws off the whole story. So the consistency of the fact that, no, this is where we're safe until, and all bets are off beyond that, this is the point of no return, that can't change or it would throw off the entire story.
Yeah. And One Dark Window does a really good job with that because in my brain, the fog really is a fog of war. That's kind of a nerdy term, but being able to only see what is necessary to the story until they venture into the danger zone is like, whoa, you're not supposed to be here. Like in your brain, you're thinking this can't be happening. Why are they in this? It's so good.
Both of us have very strong feelings about how much we love One Dark Window and Two Twisted Crowns for reasons beyond world building. But I think the cool thing about One Dark Window and Two Twisted Crowns being the fog boundary at the edge of Blunder is that we actually don't get that much locational world building, if that makes sense. Like, we don't actually know that much about Blunder itself because of the air of mystery caused by the fog. And I think that's great for some people. I know some people don't love that. I loved it. I think that's amazing. And the fact that basically for the entirety of the first book, you're left in questioning about what lies beyond the little part of the world that we've seen. I love that.
Yes, because in my brain, I see Elspeth's original first home with her uncle. Mm-hmm. One main path with fog on both sides leading to the other main castle. Then it's town square area. I'm imagining right in front of the castle, really, kind of like an enclosed area, and that's it. There is no, she literally doesn't have, besides it being Blunder, there's no sub-cities or extra cities. It's just the small town of Blunder where you cannot get out for the life of it.
Yeah, and I think the only thing I picture beyond that is that it's like Elspeth's house, that pathway, castle, town, square, whatever, and then the allowable housing is on like the edge of that square scenario, town square scenario.
Right.
But beyond that, like, to our understanding for the whole of the first book, you can't survive beyond that. So it is a very small enclosed area, and I think a lot of people think that that's a failure of the world building, but I think that really the town is supposed to be ill. Like, they're supposed to be the survivors of essentially the equivalent of a magic plague.
Exactly, which is why it's so much, which is why it's so difficult for them to conceal any and everything,
Huh.
who have cards, who have illnesses, who is touched by whatever. It's so high stakes because you're so close to everybody. Everyone knows everyone. There is no hiding
Yes.
anything. So being in her shoes and in the first book, it's very difficult. But that also brings me to the next point of just balance. There's a balance to Blunder that makes it so good versus there are some books that are so heavy in world building. You don't get anything. It doesn't connect to the plot. It doesn't add any value to it. You're just describing the world for no reason. And that
Yeah.
is one of my things that makes it very difficult for me to push through into a book.
Yeah, everyone knows me. I love Stephen King. I love everything that Stephen King does. I did not like Fairy Tale by Stephen King for that exact reason. He spends 10 pages describing the stairway into the fantasy world, and I'm like, I don't care. I don't care.
Isn't the stairwell the cover? Or is that an eye?
And it's a dragon eye.
It's a dragon eye. Okay, so I looked at it and I thought it was a stairwell. So you saying that automatically went to me, well, that makes sense. It's a main part of the thing. But if you're saying it's not, it's just like a place to the underworld almost, then I can understand why it's quite redundant to you.
Yeah, so don't get me wrong. I love Stephen King. He's long-winded. He's always been long-winded. That's surprising to no one. Oh no, it totally is the stairwell. I'm so wrong. Yeah, it totally is the stairwell. But I think this cover, for those listening, it's the cover for the mass market paperback that's like a flower monster looking thing. Makes a lot more sense based on the storyline. Yes, the stairwell is important. It is, because it's the way that the main character discovers this other universe, essentially. We come back to it so many times that I'm like, I get it, dude. It's in the weird back shed under a hatch. It's made of brick. It's really steep, slimy. There are things coming off the walls. We're having trouble. Like, I got that the first time we talked about it. I didn't need it 10 more times. It's convoluted for no reason. And I love Stephen King. He's very, I don't want to say redundant because that's the wrong word, but he revisits things that are important in every book. That's how his writing goes. But I just think potentially his fantasy is not for me because I don't like the way he world builds fantasy.
Okay, that makes sense. And as I was doing this research and I was deep in these Reddit threads, I saw somebody comment or post, I don't really know how Reddit works, saying, oh, realism in world building. The poster said he really appreciates realism, but there is a limit to it. Because like the quote you said at the very beginning of this episode, if it's not said, you automatically think of it as it functions normally. And if it's normal, it's real to us. So he gave an example of somebody signing a document with like a fountain pen on like the scratchy paper. The author went too deep into hearing the scratches, and the pieces of paper back in the olden day would fly up and there's dust. And he was like, okay, I get it. He's signing. He signs the paper. What is next in the plot? This is too real. It's microscopically detailed. And there's a point in my brain as well where if I'm reading something like that, my eyes will just skip to the next piece of dialogue where
because you're bored.
Something's happened. Yeah, exactly. So realism is very hit or miss with me, which is why I think I tend to like low fantasy, urban fantasy stuff better because it's a flicker of the imagination without having to work too hard for the situation you're in.
Yeah, and I think low stakes fantasy and particularly cozy fantasy, the assumption of what's real and normal to our world is very broad across most things. Like Legends Lattes explains coffee because the characters don't understand what coffee is, but in 5 seconds. It's not a whole thing about how coffee works and what coffee is, and it would have been a drone on the book. And I get it, the characters don't understand it, but we as the reader do. So you can't waste time on something that the reader already understands unless it functions differently at its core than it does in life.
Right.
And I think someone who is painstakingly detailed is Tolkien. But 99.9% of Tolkien's universe does not function in reality.
Yeah.
So it's okay. And Tolkien is also a very lyrical writer, in my opinion. Like, everything is almost Shakespearean to read. It's a very different style than the style fantasy tends to take on now. So it's a completely different comparison than, say, Fourth Wing. I also think, even when it comes to things like Fourth Wing, Rebecca Yarros doesn't explain what a dragon is to us. There's an expected understanding that dragons function the way we expect them to function. So here's their color, tail type, whatever, but I'm not going to explain to you that they can breathe fire and that they hatch from eggs, and because we know that. Inevitably, we know that as a fantasy reader.
And the thing that but the layer she adds to that is the connection they have with their sort of dragon gods. That is,
yeah, their political
side of everything, which is why it's like, oh, I saw a theory where they don't actually have to say the right names and stuff. So it's like,
oh my god, I saw that.
So it's like, whoo, there's a whole other level that Rebecca can take it to, but again, didn't need to spoon feed us. Well, Tolkien, he built his world brick by brick so methodically that you have to be able, like, you're looking and searching for this type of book. If not, you're gone.
Yeah, and I think that's why you get a lot of dichotomy between people who either absolutely wholeheartedly adore Tolkien, Stephen King, writers that live in that over-describing universe, versus people who absolutely DNF them and can't get through it. Because you either appreciate the depth, or you're like, I know this, move on.
Yes. I'm the latter. And what I've found that attracts me most to specific books is the breadcrumb trail of world building.
Yes.
So I don't need the first, like the prologue and the first 5 chapters, if not more, to base the world right then and there. I need the story to move. You start off with one person and you uncover specific things in the world as it goes and as it's needed. So in my head, automatically, I'm thinking Marked by Destiny with Maggie Lynn. That's why I loved it so much, is she starts off with one person. We need to go somewhere else. This is part of the adventure. We uncover specific things. Here's a little bit of the lore. Not enough to make you want to die, but you love it and you're there. You move to another place. And she only had like 3 main places, and it was like this whole adventure. And I was like, I'm down. But if it's the other, like the original, just slap it on a page and run from there, I can't do it.
No, that's so fair. I also agree that I think I prefer sort of the breadcrumb trail style of world building, where you're sort of learning almost along with characters, which I think Onyx Storm is a great example of this in the most recent past, because we spend a lot of time on islands that we've pretty much never heard of in the series prior to this, but we're not confused because Rebecca hasn't painstakingly built out this whole universe previously. We're discovering it with Violet as she does this research. It feels very much like we're along for the ride.
100%. For me, it feels like every island we go to, they stop on the beach. Everything happens just like on the shore. That they're so close, they just land for water, they turn their heads, and it's, oh, I can see this gigantic stadium on the land of the Luckies. And it just happens very quickly. And I'm like, okay, we're there, we're gone. We did what we need to. They didn't have this whole long, painstakingly long chapter of figuring out, trying to make deals and stuff like that. And I'm just like, no, we're in and we're out.
Yeah, and I think as well, we're in, we're out, but we still know how lush the foliage is on each island. We still know the color of the sand. We still know how violent the waves are. Like, Rebecca Yarros does a great job of giving us everything without spoon feeding it to us, like you said. And I think there comes a point where there are certain things in a story that you have to be spoon fed. Like, you have to know it, so it has to be laid out there for you. But the rest of the world building doesn't have to be and this looks like this, does this. I don't need that.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if that's an unpopular opinion. I don't know if we're like swinging out of left field here, but
maybe because it's us, we agree, and it's not. But in my head, I'm like, is that not just how it works? Because in my head, when we're talking about this, it makes me feel like fantasy, though it's a really, really popular and gigantic genre, is the hardest to write because you have to establish your own type of world building. And if you do it a specific way, you could alienate an entire side of the genre.
Mm-hmm. That's true. I also think the two of us are not typical sci-fi readers. That's also an incredibly difficult world building genre. We cannot speak to it because we don't read it.
Yeah, no, I tried. I really did because sci-fi is known as the male reader book. It's not fun. It's just nerdy. I can't get into sci-fi for the life of me. I cannot.
The only sci-fi I have read that I can genuinely remember off the top of my head is Red Rising.
Me too. I said it out loud in my head too. I was like, she's only read Red Rising, I think.
Yeah. And I loved it, but the world building is a little bit difficult.
Okay.
And the underlying story stems from romance.
I thought you were going to say because of the actual audiobook that you read, it was just so...
Oh, the audiobook is amazing. That is part of it. The audiobook is incredible.
Okay.
But I think... So, Red Rising takes place on Mars. We have an understanding of what Mars conditions are as people. We understand that. And it doesn't go into that very much. So, again, it's one of those things that you expect your readers... I think you have to give your readers some credit and expect that they will understand a certain level of things at the beginning of every book. Like that quote said that we said at the beginning, to go back to it, if it doesn't function differently than it is assumed to function in our real world, you don't need to explain it.
Right.
I also think when you move away from fantasy, world building in thrillers is potentially even more important than fantasy for me.
Okay.
Because when I look at something like Razorblade Tears, if we did not understand the year, the fact that it occurred in the US, and the state of the political climate in the US at the time, the story would mean nothing.
Yes. But Razorblade Tears is different. In my head, it is a thriller, but it's not a thriller.
Okay,
So I was going to say, if we took another main thriller that you're like, oh yeah, stabby, psychological thriller, what...
The only one left. The state of that town.
Okay, so that was
the cliffside, all of that. That's incredibly important to that storyline, and without that, it would not be as meaningful.
Yes.
I also think it's hard in thrillers too, because we're picturing world building as the things that do not exist in the same way as they do in the real world.
Okay.
I'll throw a Roxy out there, for example. Start in New York, end up in a small cowboy town. We understand what that means. We understand what that looks like. But we also inadvertently know what that whole small town that Kiss Me in the Dark occurs in looks like. We know where that pie eating competition happens. We know where the forest is that... I'm not going to finish that sentence because I don't want a spoiler. My brain just went... Nope.
E-break right fucking now. I was like, where are you going? Please don't go there. Because I was like, yeah, that's right. Oh, that's
Stop.
So
5 minutes later.
We still understand what that whole... In the same way that we understand the small towns and Legends lattes, we understand the ranch and the small town and Kiss Me in the Dark in the same level of depth, in my opinion.
Okay, yeah, I agree.
So I think we forget about it in things that aren't fantasy, because fantasy, we also have a magic system to world build, which is way more in depth than something that exists in our regular universe, but...
So, yes, I automatically am also thinking of Brandon Sanderson. So, I've only read one, Tress.
We've both only read Tress.
Okay. So, in my head, Tress is an amazing place to start in the Brandon Sanderson universe in general, because I feel like Brandon Sanderson, anything else is so huge, so gigantically world building, that Tress, in my, like, the way I see things, is the rest of the world works normal. Tress is on an island that is whacked, and he needed the beginning of the book to lay the ground rules, tell us how it is, there's like a disconnect to everything, but it didn't feel long-winded. He just wanted it to be easier to read than his other stuff.
Yeah, and I think with Tress, it does exist within the Cosmere, as far as I understand. It is a Cosmere novel, but you don't have to understand the rest of the Cosmere universe in order to understand Tress. And I think Tress is a good, cozy starting place for Brandon Sanderson. If all of his writing, I don't want to say is like Tress because I know it's not.
Yeah.
But if all of his writing is, I don't even know how to word this, like as digestible as Tress is, I know a lot of his other stuff is higher level fantasy, but the way that Tress is written was very processable for my brain. Like I didn't have a hard time understanding how their world worked. And I think what intimidates me about the rest of the Cosmere, Mistborn, all of that stuff, is not only that they're bricks,
Yeah.
but that they're potentially levels and levels above Tress in world building, in magic, in all of that stuff. And that's scary.
Okay, so let me put this out there. It might tickle some toes and light a fire on other people's asses, but...
Do it. I've been the one with the unpopular opinion so far. Do it.
Is that why women tend to not like sci-fi? Because it's so brain heavy that they just are not for it? They're just...
Oh, that's a good question.
Because, yeah, you're only seeing mostly men, read sci-fi stuff. And I can't. And it's...
I think that you'll find, and again, this is coming from a woman who reads predominantly fantasy romance, and out of left field horror. Those are my typical genres. I think I avoid sci-fi in particular because I don't love the sci part of it. Like, I don't care about how X mutated Y to make an alien. Like, I don't care. It's not for me. I don't know necessarily that that's gender specific, but I think it comes from a way bigger conversation here that reading stuff with a romantic baseline is not for men, which is totally not true at all. But if you look at something like Aragon, for example, the Inheritance Cycle series, those are wildly marketed towards men. Those are mostly male fantasy, similarly to Lord of the Rings, that was mostly marketed towards men to begin with. Now it's a whole thing, but that's a different story. And I think when you look at the last probably, I want to say 3 or 4 years in books, fantasy romance has really taken a popularity turn. And I think that's because we've now seen a lot more women writing fantasy romance. And it's less like Tomb Raider, half-dressed.
Yeah, well, because in what I'm seeing on Book Talk and everything is the fact that they're, face it, 95% of Book Talk is women. And what I'm seeing is they're always saying men read boring books, lame books. And it's weird to me because... I don't think that's fair. Right, because I'm like, sci-fi is not, it's not that it's boring. It's the fact that it's heavy. And it just takes a...
So, again, I think this is a much bigger conversation.
Huge, yeah.
But I think that this potentially boils down to the fact that women read to escape their responsibilities. They don't want to read about a world in peril that a man is saving. Versus fantasy romance, for example, you typically are either through the eyes of the female main character or third person, sometimes. And normally, we wind up in a place where the female main character is strong, is in charge, is well treated, or gets to enough power to be well treated. Like, I think positionally, women look to reading to not be treated how they've historically been treated. That's why romance that's fluffy and ends up in a great place, or incredibly dark and validates trauma, is most popular. Wow, this got really dark and hot takey. This is not world building at all, but this is such a good conversation.
Well, it is to an extent, because I'm taking it now from like a really, really big picture of women just don't, well, hot take. Women just don't like male authors.
I don't think that's true either, though, because 2 of my favorite authors are male.
Yes, but we know that you're an outlier, period. You read some of the craziest shit out there that sticks to
3 of my favorite authors are male.
Okay, so I'm not saying you.
No,
I'm
women in general. Yes.
What I'm seeing, and all I'm seeing as a male on Book Talk is there is no. Okay, I can't wait. This is too deep. There's no space for men on Book Talk, and it's really difficult to find a place that feels like, not that I'm seen, that's just, I feel the way about Book Talk is the way females feel about male dominated fields in the real world. And
oh, that's a good way of putting it.
So it's for me, it's jarring because it opens up the bigger picture of fuck, engineers must be fucked, doctors fucked, like, Lord, it's incredibly difficult because I'm looking at it and it's like, well, what am I going to do? Where am I going to go? And for me being a male who doesn't do sci-fi and I go to fantasy, it's all like fantasy romance.
I would even say that you do lean fantasy romance.
Well, because there's nothing left. It feels like there's nothing left because I don't do sci-fi nerdy alien plus plant equals alien plant, but I also don't do bind my wrist to the bedpost and have fun with me, sir. So there is nothing. The thing that's in the middle for me is fantasy romance. So, and that's where my stem of romance has a place in the fantasy, which I can enjoy if it adds to the plot. But if it's just a raw thing, I can't do. I'm no raw next question. I'm a no, maybe not, but let's see where this goes. And it's just, it's very difficult for me. And I think this is a different conversation and we can expand on it more in a different episode. But I think world building has a lot to, and the style has a lot to do. And
I also think, and this is not a shot at you, so please don't take it as such.
I'll end the podcast right now.
That you're brand new to reading.
Oh, yeah.
Like, we're only a year in here. And your big leap into reading was Book Talk. You did not have really the opportunity to explore what you liked without the influence of social media. And I think that's something that I've had the lucky pleasure of doing, is that because I've read since I was a kid, I just read what interested me, which is potentially why I am a female who does enjoy stereotypically not quote-unquote female-directed books, because I never cared.
Right.
I just read whatever I liked and went with it. Do I like traditional fantasy romance, spicy romance, dark romance? Yeah, hundo. Love it. But I don't talk to a lot of other diehard Stephen King fans on Book Talk that are female.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also a huge fan of Travis Baldree and TJ Klune. TJ Klune is gay, so that helps the whole...
TJ Klune's your middle.
TJ Klune's the middle.
I see it.
And Travis Baldree is very cozy fantasy. I actually think your middle ground is cozy fantasy rather than fantasy romance, because cozy fantasy hits your fantasy benchmarks without spice most of the time.
Yeah, and if I were to look at cozy fantasy, though, Legend of Lantes and Bookshop Mundos were the only ones that I can categorize as cozy right now. Like, I haven't run into anything yet.
That's kind of what I'm getting at, is like,
yeah.
I think part of the reason you feel the way that you feel is because of the social media exposure that you got. And if you had jumped into something like Legends of Lattes in the beginning and had the freedom to develop your fantasy taste without the influence of Book Talk, you may have wound up in a different niche than what you found yourself in now.
Yeah.
And that's not to hate on Book Talk at all, because Book Talk is the reason that I found cowboy romance, for example, which is one of my favorite subgenres of romance at this point.
Yeah.
But I feel like it's very hard to develop your personal preference, your personal taste in reading when you're constantly bombarded by, this is what's good, this is what's popular, this is what you need to read, this is what you need to read. And it's also why I'm such a huge fan of ARC reading and indie authors, because it offers you a broader perspective than what is new and popular and hot on Book Talk.
Right. Nowadays, we pick off the algorithm. Before, as a kid, you used to pick off the blurb. Or
the cover, or whatever was at the library, right? Like, I didn't read Percy Jackson, let's say, because it was popular. I read it because it was cool and it was available. Right. The story sounded cool and it was available to me, and it was for my age group. Same thing goes for when the first Aragon book came out. I wasn't even 10.
Yeah.
So I read that because I was 12 and loved dragons.
Yep.
Not because it's what was cool or popular or whatever. Quite honestly, it was not cool, and people thought I was a giant nerd because I was carrying around my giant brick of an Aragon book at like 12 years old.
Yeah.
And I think at the time that was potentially a hard thing to be a reader as a kid in an age group that kind of didn't value reading the way we do now. But I also am very thankful for that experience because I have a whole taste developed outside of social media influence.
Yeah. So check back in when it's year 2 of this podcast, and I've now 2 years into the journey, and see what happens, because things will change. We can revisit this definitely and see what authors put out, how they change, and see what happens with the scope of book talk.
Yeah, and I think to bring it back to world building, a big thing is that female authors write characters and write worlds very, very differently than male authors do.
Yeah.
And female authors, obviously, write to the female gaze. Male authors tend to write to the male gaze. And those are two entirely different perspectives. And to be honest, I think part of the reason I loved Tress so much is because Sanderson wrote that for his wife. Mm-hmm. That is 100% to the female gaze.
Yeah.
Versus, I think, like, Way of Kings, for example, is very high fantasy, male gaze type writing. Although, I haven't read much Sanderson, so I can't say male gaze in the sense that, like, objectifying women male gaze. I mean more like
war,
battle,
and,
strategic,
yes, male
political strategy type approach.
Like the what makes a man versus what men like is a difference. There's a line of, just like men like war, violence, conflict, pushing each other, and pride, versus men like women and whatever, like the caveman.
Exactly.
Style. So
exactly.
That makes sense.
And this is not to say that there's not room for all of those things and people shouldn't read all of those things.
Absolutely.
I just think that coming back around to world building, most people are reading to escape. To an alternate world, to escape from their life, to escape from reality. That's literally the tagline of this podcast. Like,
literally.
So at the end of the day, we will lean to world building that best reflects what we want to escape. So I think for me, for example, being an incredibly busy working mom, I love escaping to that take no shit badass female main character in a fantasy book, because in my day-to-day I don't get to feel like that.
Right.
Or, for example, to cowboy romance, where the man has been written by a woman and no man will ever exist in that way.
I think a cool angle would be a female author getting like a male perspective while she's writing it, because there are some things that I've experienced with these romantic fantasies that if you were writing, if your character or whatever decides to write from the male perspective, there are some things that men feel in those intimate parts that you guys might not know, which would be really cool. So in my head, it's like if Roxy was writing the romantic suspense with, I forget which one it was, with the brother, and writing, I think she has like her husband to be able to just be like, does this make sense how the male is feeling? And it's like, yes, no. And I think if for me, when I was reading, I'm like, whoa, how does she get that? Like, where did she get that part? Because it makes sense. Yeah,
I remember you complimenting Roxy on the fact that her male perspectives particularly that was specifically and particularly combined. Particularly in relational falling in love type scenes. I remember you specifically saying, like, this is how it feels for a guy, and I'm really impressed that she captured this narrative.
Me too.
Okay, we were supposed to talk about other things, but we are way far into this podcast.
Pilot plans. So on building off of world building, what books do you feel with whatever, just whatever, that would make a good movie or TV show adaptation?
So I want to preface this by saying, I think a lot of people think that their favorite books would make good movie and TV because they're good books. And that's just not true. I think we need to look at something like Aragon per se, where the movie was not good, but the books are incredible. Did it have potential to be a good movie? Sure, but it was not good.
Mm-hmm.
I am worried about the Fourth Wing adaptation.
Me too.
Hopeful, but worried. I think something that would make great TV, in my opinion, is Lila Sage's Done and Dusted Cowboy Romance series, because it all takes place in one small town. They're interconnected standalones, so you could build out all of these people, the side characters, the relationships and stuff, and make a perfect episode to episode development out of it, and simultaneously have all 4 of these books occurring in the timelines that they were supposed to occur while developing a bigger story.
Okay,
but I think
let me quickly ask you this, because I think it might, because I just want to understand. When we're saying TV show, are we thinking like the really long 10-season type of TV shows, or are we thinking of the more common nowadays, the Netflix 5, 6, 7-parter type things like that?
So I think when it comes to something like Done and Dusted, the amount of seasons for the amount of books potentially, so like 4, 5 maybe. But I also understand that with the help of Lila Sage, because fuck anything that does not include the author on the adaptation.
Real.
It could potentially be like 8, 9, 10 seasons, something along the lines of like a One Tree Hill, because you've built this friend group and go from there. That's my opinion. I also think it would be a lot easier to adapt something like Cowboy Romance to TV than something like fantasy. So like, again, I wholeheartedly adore One Dark Window. I don't think it would make a good movie. I don't think it would make a good TV show, because the existence in this little echo chamber of a town would be boring for TV.
Yeah.
Or boring for a movie. I think one that would potentially be good is Fourth Wing. I'm so scared, though. I'm so scared, because I look at it as the potential of something like Game of Thrones, much like fuck George R.R. Martin, but that's another side. If they put the budget into it that it deserves, and we get phenomenal dragons, amazing magic, then the actual acting of the storyline I'm not concerned about. I'm concerned about the development of the world. Like when we talk about world building, that's what's so important, and I'm scared that places like Biscaya, things like the dragons, things like the griffins, will not be realized to the extent that they are in the books in a TV adaptation. So now that I'm thinking about it, I'm having a hard time picking something in fantasy that I think would be not easy, but solidly adaptable to movies or TV.
Yeah, I didn't go this deep into thinking about this. I went, ooh, cool topic, TV show. Like,
okay, well, I also have ones that, like, it might not work out, but I would love it.
Yeah, mine are just, they don't make sense. It's more of just like, I have a recurring basis of why I think they would work, but I didn't think anything further on it.
Fair.
So just take all of my shit with a grain of salt, even smaller than that, because it literally is just so much bullshit. Like, do you have anything left on your?
I was just gonna say that Through a Mirror Darkly would be the wildest, like, TV miniseries.
So, like, the couple-parter, yes.
Yeah, like something short and sweet, like maybe even 4 or 5 episodes, like a one-shot thing. Yeah. It would be wild.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. That is a good one.
Hit me with it.
So I have a lot, and you're gonna ride me through. Okay, so
Hey, yo, what the fuck?
TV shows. I didn't mean that. Hang on. So
Okay.
something about the story is multiple. There's a multiple things that could make into good TV shows, meaning multiple episodes. So
Recurrence.
I have How to Kill a Man and Get Away with It.
Oh, I didn't even think of that. That would be so good.
Because of just the amount of like the guys she could go through, but then the banter with her friends and whatever's going on. Great. Just multiple episodes just all the time. And every season is a new like not mystery, but like the cops are on her and she's trying to like
sick. So sick.
Another one, so Lorien Legacies, because there's so many books that within every season there's different villains, you just build up to it and have it like that. Because I see it as like
seen the movie?
Yeah, I saw the movie.
Okay.
It flopped hard.
Okay, I'm just asking.
I love Alex Pettyfer and I love Diana or something.
Her.
Yes, it flopped, but I'm thinking TV shows, not movie. So because you build whatever. I have Red Rising, never read it. I just saw somebody say it, and I was like, just in the generalization of what Red Rising is in the books, I think could work.
Okay, so I've only read the first one. So again, take this with a grain of salt. I have not read beyond the end of book 1. I think it could make a good movie series. Okay. Potentially in the same way as like
Star Wars.
Yeah, or I was going to say like what Tron tried to be.
Oh, that flopped hard too.
Yeah. So, although Red Rising is not like a futuristic sci-fi, I still think the follow through. I don't know. I have no thoughts about sci-fi. Like, I think potentially Red Rising could be really good. But again, it depends on how it progresses because I genuinely don't know beyond the end of book 1.
Okay. My next one, I've read 13% of the book, but my next TV show is Legendborn. Because...
Ooh.
Okay, so... wait, you're going to want to read it eventually too. But my thing is just, it's a great YA...
Okay.
bingeable TV show for them. It has
like middle ground.
It's set on in your perspective of like a younger adult, like female. So I just think that it's a really great with the magic combined. I'm scared it'll kind of lean towards the Mortal Kombat, Mortal Instrument stuff. I don't want it to go that way because it's young but magic. But I think if they did it right because it's POC, it can be really cool because there's deeper things to it.
True.
And my last one as a TV show is the main, like the small parters, Wicked Deep.
Oh. No, you're so right.
Does it not just feel like like a Halloween?
It feels like a Halloween special. Yeah.
Thank you. So you're just like, yes.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're totally right. And for anyone who hasn't read The Wicked Deep,
give it a chance. Give it a chance.
It's so short.
Yeah, it's short.
It's short, and if you like small town, like Halloween town, practical magic type vibes, Wicked Deep. Which that's the other thing. I think the genre that Wicked Deep would exist in exists in TV and movies.
Exactly.
So the adaptability is probably higher than some other paranormal fantasy type stuff.
Mm-hmm. So movies. Book of Doors.
Another one I haven't gotten to.
Man, oh man, Book of Doors would be such a cool movie.
Okay.
That's all I'm going to say.
I want to read it, so don't spoil it.
Yeah. So this one is already happening, but I think I'm just agreeing with that. Yeah, I'd like to see where this goes. It could completely flop, but let's just see how it's made.
Okay.
Wait, is that a movie or is that a TV show? That's a movie, right? Yeah.
Movie.
I do know how you feel about it. That's why I'm like, this could really flop if this is not.
To be fair, the casting is star-studded.
Yeah. So.
And I think Frida's involved.
Big shrugs.
Potential. I feel like, again, though, we're talking about this, thrillers have higher potentials of making good psychological thriller films than they do, like, fantasy romance making good fantasy films.
Yeah, and I think there's a huge difference between being a Netflix special movie versus the
Cinema.
cinema. So
Yeah.
I'm thinking Housemaid, Netflix.
Mm.
I don't think it's going to do well in the cinemas. It's not. I don't think it's going to hit as hard.
Okay.
But if it was a Netflix original that they just like pooped out there, maybe.
Fair.
And my last one is Home is Where the Bodies Are.
Oh, I think that'd be a good TV show.
Okay, because I have in brackets, maybe TV. So I had that for Rising and Home is Where the Bodies Are.
I wish you all could have seen Joaquin's face when he said that. That was killer. And I can't. I agree, though. Home is Where the Bodies Are has such deep sibling trauma and connection.
That's where I was going. I was like, each episode or season could be a buildup of the background of each sibling, and then it just comes together at the end and it just is so,
100%. I think that could be so good.
Yeah.
I wanted to quickly touch on a couple of things that do exist as adaptations.
Okay.
That I really did enjoy. And I will preface the fact that for the most part, they're Stephen King's. Because the man has had 95 fucking adaptations made.
Really?
First of all, The Outsider. HBO made a TV series. It was fantastic. It was not 100% true to the book, so as someone who read the book first, I was like, oh, this was missing, oh, that was missing. But if you can mentally separate book standard to TV standard and enjoy it as a TV show, it is a phenomenal show that does justice to the book, in my opinion.
Cool.
And as someone who doesn't read, my husband watched it with me and thoroughly enjoyed the TV show as a TV show. Nice. So someone that hasn't done the backstory of the book can also enjoy it, which I think is really important because you're trying to draw audiences that are not just the readers.
And Cynthia Erivo is Holly?
Yes. Which is why you need to read Mr. Mercedes. Because it's all connected. I need you to do it.
Tell, I think Morgan's a little bit obsessed with me trying to read this. One of her favorite series. Oh my gosh.
Yes.
Funny. Okay.
There was another one that I was going to say. Hold on. Oh, Misery. Misery by Stephen King and the movie with Kathy Bates.
Oh, you said Kathy Bates. I was going to say. Yeah.
Top notch. I also think there's going to be a lot of disagreement with Stephen King book fans. I am a massive fan of The Shining. It does not do a good job of telling the book's story, but separately, The Shining is a phenomenal movie, and The Shining is a phenomenal book. They're not the same thing, though.
Interesting.
Yeah. I think that was all of my big feelings. Pet Sematary is okay.
The second one's great, isn't it? The new one?
No. Opposite.
Yeah, I know.
Opposite. The new one fucked up characters and it made me very mad. So the OG, I think really what it gets to here is a lot of the old Stephen King adaptations from like the 80s and 90s he was involved with are pretty true to the books outside of The Shining. And he's involved with a lot of the new TV shows as well. I haven't watched Under the Dome, so I don't know if that was good or not. That's kind of teetering on sci-fi for me, so I didn't read that book either. But yeah, I think Stephen King has had a lot of good, true adaptations made when it comes to book to movie or book to show.
Well, that completely, Bo, wraps up the main topics, even though we did a little drift off. But it's time for the question of the day. We kind of have two. So they are, what is your bookish pet peeves and what is your favorite bookish quote?
I will let you take a running swing at pet peeves because I know you have some feelings.
I'm just going to go straight off. I'm not even going to explain why. If you agree, you agree. If you don't, you don't. Pet peeves. 4,000 quote or reviews at the beginning of a book. Just annoy me. Why am I flipping 7 pages to read the same thing over and over again? Cool. The next one is long blurbs. Can't deal with a long blurb. Tell me what it is. Don't spoil it. Have me leaving on an edge. I'm cool with that.
What's long?
3 paragraphs.
Okay, so like a solid
1 or 2 paragraph is cool because I need to know a little bit. But if it's too long, lost me. That's the prologue, really.
Yeah.
3 overused phrases. So some authors repeat the same things over and over again in the way they write and say things. I can't do it reading. I say that I do it all the time in real life, which I get. But writing is different than speaking. 4 stickers on books. Everyone hates it. I mean, if you like a sticker on a book, you're a sociopath.
Even worse, permanent stickers on books.
That's also why I was like, okay, gross.
Now a movie. The fucking worst.
Okay, so then that, point A, movie covers.
Criminal.
I hate it.
Criminal.
Reese Witherspoon is gorgeous, but I don't need her on the cover of my book. Thanks.
Oh my god. Also, on that note, I'm offshooting off of this. The, like, Reese's Book Club picks. Built-in permanent sticker.
Yeah.
I'm glad you loved it. Leave me alone.
Amazing. Chapters not starting on fresh pages. Stephen King sometimes does this. I get it, but...
Stephen King doesn't start chapters. He breaks his chapters down into subsegments, which you also hate.
Also hate. Yep. Spine breaking. That's kind of hot topic-y.
I hate it.
Yep. Just you opened right up, broke. Gross.
That makes me want to cry.
Yeah. Mass paperbacks, also another pet peeve. Just hate them. Small. My hands are big. I can deal with a big book. If I'm holding a mass paperback and I'm holding it like a football, I'm throwing it out the window, really.
Fair.
Last one. This one is not an actual book. It's just what happens when you're reading. Why are people trying to talk to you when I'm in the... Like, you see me reading. People who are just instantly trying to talk whilst I'm reading. Hate it. I just hate it. I'm reading.
Fair.
Those are my pet peeves. And I have no quotes because I don't read that like that.
So I have no alternative pet peeves to Joaquin's extensive list. So we're going to flip-flop here. You get his pet peeves and my favorite quotes because your girl annotates. So I have some thoughts and feelings. Obviously, I could give you 12 quotes that I love from Onyx Storm. Probably more than that. I'm not going to do that to you. First, we're going to give you a Quicksilver quote from Kingfisher himself. The quote is, "Don't call her Sunshine," he commanded. Why not? If Carrion's plan was to poke the bear, then he sure as hell knew how to go about it. But Kingfisher didn't respond to the taunting note in his question. He cocked his head a little, nostrils flaring, and spoke in a low rumble. "Because she is moonlight, the mist that shrouds the mountains, the bite of electricity in the air before a storm, the smoke that rolls across a battlefield before the killing starts. You have no idea what she is, what she could be. You should call her Majesty." Screaming. This in the audiobook made me squeal.
Your body echo?
Yes. Yes. Hard yes.
Ambulance is needed.
In the same breath, I have a couple of romance quotes that are less touch her and die vibes than Kingfisher. So I recently read Out on a Limb by Hannah Bonham Young. That is the sweetest romance ever. And I have 2 quotes from that book. One is, "You can't change anything by hiding it. You'll just look back on memories and realize you tried to erase yourself from them, and how sad that would be." Love that. Big vibes. The second one that I have from Out on a Limb is, "It's so much easier to communicate insecurities when you don't need to communicate them at all. Isn't that all we ever want? to be seen, to be heard, validated, even when we're not able to ask for it. Ugh. My heart. Joaquin's like, I didn't know romance books had these quotes. Hannah Bonham Young is a different kind. I love her writing so much. I also have a quote from Out of the Woods, which is the second interconnected standalone to Out on a Limb. And it's a quick one. It is, if you give me space, I'll plant myself next to you always. I wish this book was out when I did my wedding vows, because that would have been in it.
Yeah,
It's so good.
Maybe I'll put it in mine.
Yeah, that's coming up. You got time for a book you didn't read.
General Spice incoming!
Okay, and last one. This is one that I feel like will resonate with Joaquin, potentially.
Interesting.
Potentially. It is from Swift and Saddled by Lila Sage, my cowboy queen. And it is, quote, as far as friends went, I didn't really have any. Not because I didn't want them, but because making friends as an adult is hard. Honestly, I enjoyed the solitude, but there's a difference between that and being lonely.
Facts.
That one resonates hard.
Jesus Christ. I can't. Like, yeah, no, that's huge. That's something I would have been like, fuck, and highlighted in my Kindle for sure.
Told you. So I was picking quotes, and I was like, oh, I'm not just going to pick like spicy touch her and die quotes that I like, because don't get me wrong, I love that. But that last quote is so like gut punchy, I think, to people like Joaquin and I that are both painfully introverted and have learned that making friends as an adult is really, really hard. Mm-hmm. And that maintaining adult friendships is also very, very hard.
Yeah. And the difference, I guess we're just going to go and change it about our friendship. The difference between our friendship that is great is the fact that it's not a proximity friendship. And that's what all of my friendships were before, was just based on being in school with somebody, seeing them every single day. Ours is based solidly on a hobby that we both enjoy. And then we uncovered more things that we ended up being the same in, the way we think about things. And the fact that we both just learned that our favorite colors were the exact same like 2 days ago after being best friends for a year is crazy. But it's the low maintenance friendships where one of us could fall off the face of the earth and the other person just being like, hey, I'm just going to keep texting you, but like, if you're dead, let me know.
I literally texted Joaquin last week. All I said was signs of life.
That was a tough one for me. I went, yeah, okay, I'm here, I guess. So it's those, but it's more of like, if the rule is if we don't hear anything straight up for 48 hours, it's calling the cops.
No, because usually it's like somebody will at least like a message or something.
Yeah, reactions on Apple is huge because it's just like a thumbs up, I'm here. But if it's not read and it's not responded to, there's something going on. So
I would be texting the fiance if I hadn't heard from you in 48 hours.
Yeah, we have our addresses, we have our local city police on speed dial or fine.
I know where to find you.
Yeah, it's not hard. He's either at home or in the library. Or he was abducted.
Joaquin and I love to say that we are the same person in different fonts.
Absolutely. I love that.
And
that should be a quote.
Yeah, I think really doubling back to that quote, like the difference between those proximity friendships that we all maintained in high school and adult friendships is the ability to find people that are the same font or the same person in a different font.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's that sappy ending for this week.
Aww.
I knew that quote was going to resonate, and I was like, I'm leaving it last because we're both going to get savvy about it.
Oh, you crazy. God.
Well, if you have lasted this long, thank you so much for sticking it out with us. We are so happy to have you here, and we appreciate you. We would love to hear all of your thoughts on world building, books you think would make great TV and movies, and your favorite book quotes.
Yeah, we love you guys. We're here every Friday. You know where to find us, Spotify and YouTube, 12 p.m. EST. And yeah, that's it for us on this spectacular Friday.
Bye.
Bye.